The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them. Figuring out what Montessori is exactly can be tough, and especially when there are all sorts of Montessori words out there that are really confusing at times. So what we're going to do on this episode is clarify a few concepts that are often used in Montessori classrooms and between Montessori teachers and educators, yet that can also be easily misunderstood by those who are not in Montessori. So basically, we're going to dive into some Montessori lingo. Now, with me to do that today is Marissa Poole. Marissa has been in the classroom for almost a decade and in a number of different roles, starting as an assistant and now as the lead teacher in a children's house or primary classroom. There goes that lingo again. So it's 3 to 6 year olds in a Montessori school. And that is at Oak Meadow School in Massachusetts. One of the things I appreciate about Marissa and the conversation we have is that we're not talking about dry academic definitions here, but rather trying to get at what a few Montessori terms actually mean in the real world of daily life with children and why it all even matters. And a quick additional note that toward the end, Marissa and I get into a discussion about pretend play. Now, for those who don't know, this can be a heated topic among Montessorians and definitely of fans of kind of play-based schools. So get ready for that. That is it. So I hope you enjoy the discussion and maybe discover something new. Here we go. Hi, Marissa. Glad to have you on the show.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good talking here. So today, for everybody out there, we're going to be talking about Montessori lingo. So, basically some words we use as educators that might not be so clear to those outside of Montessori. So really to, the normal human beings out there that aren't in our field right now. So maybe to jump straight in, I know, Marissa, we were talking a little bit ago when you actually contacted me and you raised this experience you had with a dad. And I think it was about the language area in Montessori.
Yeah, so this kind of made me realize and take a step back that maybe we need to kind of address this topic more. It was a parent-teacher conference day, and I was having a conference with one of my kindergarten students' dads. So this child had been in the classroom for 3 years, and I think this was like a big thing for me. After having a child for 3 years, this kind of still came up. So I was about to talk about all the things that she was reading and writing and working on in the phonics area. And I started it by saying, so in the language area, and really quickly, the dad kind of cut me off and said, "Oh, the language area, which language do you mean? Do you mean Spanish?" And that was just kind of a huge moment for me. Like, I've not done my job of really explaining, what that means to parents.
Yeah.
And, so it just made me think of all the other words that we as Montessori educators use and kind of take for granted that other people know what we're talking about, but they might not.
And it's because what jumps to me immediately is like, one, that first, this child's been in your classroom, right, for 3, and I don't want to put you on the spot because I know even in classrooms that I was in, it's like a parent might not even know, let's say, what the pink tower is, but their child had been in the class for 2 years, like something,
right?
Like, so it's an interesting fact that some of these parents don't have any clue what we've been doing in the classroom for all of these years. So that's one thing.
Yes.
And the second is like, so it just makes sense. Like before I was in Montessori, I would have the same reaction as that dad. Like, oh yeah, language is like, like a foreign language, right? But
correct.
So
yes.
In Montessori, right? So what is language in the language area, would you say?
So the language area in a Montessori classroom is just all the work or activities that we would present and practice with a child around their, I guess, whatever language their community is speaking. And in my community, we are teaching how to read and write in English. Yeah. So all the things that, all the sound games and phonics and learning to read and write in the sentence and all those beginning readers. So that's the what I mean when I say the language area.
Yeah.
And yes, to most parents, I think when we talk about language in other sorts of schooling, we might use just the word English. When I went to school and I was learning to read and write, that subject area was called English.
Yep.
So just simple things like that, where we kind of just take for granted that they know what we're talking about.
Yeah. And it's interesting for that language came up for you, but like the normal ones that come up kind of in the Montessori community, and then parents are like, wait, what do you mean? I know for me, one of the big ones that I use a lot, I see it a lot, but sometimes parents are like, wait, and it was prepared environment. It's like, what is that?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Prepared environment is something that is a phrase that's so commonly used among teachers in school. And, we use it so much that we think that it's easily figured out. But when you take a step back and you're talking about prepared environment to parents and families who are new to Montessori, I think the most immediate thought that comes to mind is like the environment as in taking care of the earth. Which is of course is a huge part of our classroom, but not exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about prepared environment.
Yeah, and just to say, like, it's so clear that especially today, like, politically, culturally, like, environment comes up all the time, whether it's in the news, you're talking with friends. So it just seems like the normal thing would, for most people out there, not Montessori, you think about like the earth and, recycling, that type of thing with environment.
Exactly. So, when I'm really careful now to preface that phrase prepared environment with what it actually means. So, at my school, we have back to school night and also curriculum night, and those are great times to do a little bit of parent education. And I want to express like all the importance of our prepared environment, but I might lead with our classrooms, make everything available to your child. So if your child can reach it, or if it's within their eyesight, that means it's available to them. And with lessons and instruction and practice, they are basically allowed to do anything in their classroom, which we refer to as our learning environment. And so a lot of the work of a Montessori teacher is kind of done behind the scenes. So we're preparing this whole classroom for your children so that when they come in, they can really take ownership of it.
Yeah.
And so you might hear us say prepared environment a lot, and that's what we're meaning.
Yeah, so it's like it's perfect fit for the child, and we behind the scenes have prepared it for his level in every way.
Exactly. From, something that you might not think is a big deal, but with small tables and small chairs for that child's, average size for their age, but then also more in-depth things like the snack shelf. So in the Montessori classroom, we have snack available for most of the morning, and we give a lesson on how to recognize that you're hungry, and then when you recognize that you're hungry, how to help yourself to a snack. And something like that is kind of covers the whole gamut of what we really mean by preparing it for the child.
And it's like, so even in doing something like that where a child can serve himself, like we've prepared an environment in the snack area or the food area, and that just builds that independence that we're ultimately trying to help a child with in the long run.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because a few things come to mind. I think I'm going to ruin this prepared environment in people's minds forever with these examples, but I'm going to use them. So the main one I think is the easiest here is like, as adults, like we prepare our rooms for different things, like the bedroom, you're going to have a bed and you're going to have covers that, you're warm at night and stuff like that. Or in the kitchen, you've got everything out. Like if you're going to cook dinner, like we just realized we got this apartment, there's no microwave in the apartment. I was thinking, I've never been somewhere where there's no microwave, recently. So, it's not prepared for some of the things that we would normally do. Like say we were popping popcorn or something like that. But I think the one that's going to ruin it all for everybody, but it's so clear, is like we have all experienced the bathroom when you go in there and there is no toilet paper. And it's like, that is an unprepared environment at the
Yes.
greatest,
Yes.
And I mean, it's kind of silly, like I'm using that example, but so much with children, when we don't prepare or get things for their level, then they can't really do what's needed to be done.
Right.
And then they're going to be needing our help. And I think your snack example is like, I go to a lot of, preschools that are not Montessori, and what do you see? But it's the teacher is the one giving everything to the child, whether it's the juice, whether it's the snacks, and they're just not building their own independence there. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny that you bring that up. Like, if something that's supposed to be there isn't there. So of course, each morning we are preparing the classroom and making sure all the supplies are restocked. If there's paper that's out, we put the paper back. We make sure pencils are sharpened and all of that. And I think that teaching children that the environment is not it doesn't refill itself.
Yeah,
and teaching them the importance that, yes, we've prepared it for you, but there's not an endless amount of paper. There's not an endless amount of, if there's a little art project, there's not an endless amount of paint or things like that. So actually in my classroom, which I've found really helps with the independence and understanding that it's not a constant flow of supplies that have been prepared for you.
Yeah.
We actually have little signs that say help on it. So if a child uses the last bit of paint, they place a help sign on that activity and either put it back on the shelf, or if it's on an easel or something,
interesting.
they just leave the help sign there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it helps them understand that that's not going to get refilled immediately for them. And it's something that they can't access themselves. And I think that's an important part of the prepared environment as well, is letting children know that sometimes things run out and we'll have to wait for the next day or
and I think that's cool. I haven't heard somebody using a help sign like that, but I like the idea, and particularly because it made me think about the development of the quote prepared environment, how different it is for different age levels and ability levels. So I'm just thinking of like infant or toddler room. They're not even anywhere near the idea of thinking about where does this stuff come from. Like it's just there, and then as you get to the 3 to 6 and they're becoming a little bit more self-aware, particularly as they get a little bit older in that classroom. Yeah. They need to know, like, it doesn't just show up out of nowhere. Like the stuff comes. And I love how you've kind of made that explicit. And for a lot of the parents out there, even teachers that don't know about the upper levels in Montessori, like at some point, the kids are going to completely take care of the classroom, where they're the ones who are going to have to refill things in the class.
Exactly. Yeah, that was my next point. In my classroom, we have jobs or responsibilities at the end of the day. And one of them is like re-rolling all the work mats. And so as the children get older, and that's more of like a second or third year job. So kind of the children that are around kindergarten age who do the jobs at the end of the day. And so they're participating in that prepared environment after they've gotten lessons and after the classroom has been established for a little while. So I think it's really important for parents to really understand what that means, because not only does it mean that teachers are doing their jobs, but it's also we are teaching your child that they are an active participant in this little community. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And I think connected with all this is that a prepared environment is not like, oh, this exact 3 to 6 room. Like a prepared environment can apply to any environment. Like even at home, it could be a prepared environment for your particular child, or if you have 2 or 3 of them. So the term is really how we make a room or an area or a community prepared for the people within it. And in this case, it's 3 to 6, or children in the primary classroom. Yeah, cool. So I'm thinking of a few I want to cover. I know prepared environment is one of them. Another one is, I mean, it seems so like, it's like second nature to me, but I know it's not at all to like just normal parents, is practical life. So, practical life, Marissa, what is it?
So practical life is usually a rather large curriculum area of the classroom. And I mean, when I say practical life, it's just self-explanatory to me. It's all the things that we do in our practical lives. But, on the surface level, sure, it's scooping, learning how to scoop and spoon and twist and open different kinds of containers and learn how to pour out of different vessels. But also, there's so much more to it. I think sometimes parents struggle to see the importance of the practical life area and kind of think, oh, my child's scooping these peas all day long.
Yeah, like what's up with that?
Yeah, exactly. So, my job as an educator is really to explain the importance on all levels of practical life. Yes, your child does need to learn how to use a spoon and how to pour their own water and how to fold things. But more than that, I feel like, especially in my community, parents are really thinking about, when is my child going to learn how to read? That's always one of the first questions I get from new parents coming into my classroom. And I always start by talking about practical life, because before a child is even developmentally ready to kind of take on that big task of learning letter sounds and how to put them together to make words, we are setting the stage in the practical life area, because we've prepared all of this work that is laid out from left to right. So it trains the eye and the brain to get used to that motion for reading. We are developing those fine motor skills by, threading beads onto a string and getting hand strength to where it would need to be to eventually hold a pencil. So all of those things in practical life kind of lead down the path of pre-reading and eventually reading. And I'm always trying to stress that to parents, because, when you walk into my classroom, the practical life area is half of it.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, and it's just so important. And then, of course, you want your child to be able to unbutton their shirt or tie their shoelaces. And that's where it all comes from. And it's just fostering that independence that we're always talking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's almost like there's two separate things going on. One is that kind of foundational work from more of the traditional, quote, academic things that we do, maybe writing and reading. But parents often, and even myself, like, think of education as really those academic skills. And it's so weird at this age, like the idea that we're pushing or focused on the reading and the writing, although kids are, really, quote, advanced in Montessori as compared to outside of it. I mean, what's so important is that children can actually do things in their lives for themselves. And it makes me, it's kind of connected, I think, like with older children today I see, or older young adults today, that, you leave college and there's this feeling like, oh, I'm going to conquer the world and I know all of this kind of intellectual stuff, but nobody can do real work anymore.
Yes.
So I love, like, there's that show, I've only seen an episode or two. It's called Dirty Jobs. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay. Yeah. So there's something about like that guy that's just like, I'm going to go out and do these jobs that nobody wants to do and then like get them done.
Yes, exactly.
And I feel like these Montessori kids, I swear, when I first got into Montessori, I was looking at some of these kids like, I really need to get back to the basics with myself. I feel like,
definitely. It's so interesting that you bring that up, because I, in my own personal life, am a huge sewer, and I sew a lot of clothes and all, anything. And so I bring that into the classroom a lot. I know that sewing is a big part of the practical life curriculum, but I feel like in my classroom, I'm always putting out more and more and more sewing. And just the other day, I was giving a lesson on sewing up just a very simple bag. And one of the administrators for my school came into the classroom to deliver a message, and they were asking the student if at another time that they could give them a lesson on how to sew a bag because they didn't know how. And, that just really highlights
that's great.
The importance of that sort of thing, because this 5-year-old can go home and sew a button or sew up a little bag, and then also kind of teach the adults that missed that around them.
Yeah. And I can just imagine the pride in that of like going home and teaching your parent something or a friend. Like thinking about practical life just today, I know there's so much emphasis, and I think this has been in our culture, and understandably in many ways, that we have to get education to the poorer communities, which I think is awesome. And we want to strive for that. But there's really a lack of education in rich communities, because oftentimes you have, the richer, affluent people having nannies and maids and do everything for their children. So it's like this practical life work. What I love about Montessori is it's like this, it brings everybody back to a normal level of like, hey, we all need this stuff. We all need to take care of ourselves. And Montessori has this quote about, it's called the quote, one who has too many servants becomes increasingly dependent on them. And I think it's so true. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the more affluent communities they're kind of creating these children that think they're going to change the world, but they really can't even, they can't sew a button. You need to start at the basics first. So that's one thing I love about the quote, practical life in Montessori is it's just like, hey, we all got to know how to clean a table. And, and it's not like, hey, 20 years from now, it'd be awesome if, you have enough money where you don't need to be cleaning your own table. I think that's great. But man, that action of being able to move your hand, clean the table, the pride of being like, I washed that at 4, it's so huge. So,
exactly.
But anyways, that is practical life. I think it's a good segue because that is one of the quote works or activities in a Montessori classroom. So I thought one thing I definitely want to cover was work. Like what is, when you're talking with parents, do you describe what the kids are doing in the classroom as work, or are you kind of like, nah, I don't really do it that way? Like, what's your take?
Well, I would say a couple of years, and last year I would always be saying work, 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 work. And now I kind of mix up what I say by either calling it an activity or a work. And I think that this one is really important because we use this language all day at school with the children. And so what they're doing is work, and what they're describing as their day is that they did all of this work. And so that gets relayed home to parents. So I love that we're talking about this word in this context because, especially those first parent-teacher conferences of the year, or that first back-to-school night where we might say the word work a lot, it can be off-putting to some parents. A lot of parents have been working their whole lives and started working at a young age before they really wanted to. And so they want their child to play and have fun because they're going to be working, until forever.
Yeah.
So why do they want their young child to have to work now? And so something that I'm always sure to touch on is that when we say work, it's really child geared. So all of these activities, sure, we could call them playing, or we could just call them an activity, but a child really wants to know that they're needed, that they're useful, and that they're contributing to those around them. And you can see that even at home, your child's always wanting to help you wash dishes, or wants to vacuum, or wants to help you mow the lawn. They are looking at your work and they're wanting to do it. And so at school, all the things that are on trays on the shelf is their work, and they're all purposeful activities that really contribute to their learning, to their classroom, and to their peers around them. And so I think it's really important to let parents know that work isn't a dirty word.
Yeah, work isn't a dirty word. I like that.
Yeah. Work is really important for a child, especially at this age.
Yeah, and I wonder, because so much with adults, and I remember as a child myself, like there was this element. I remember my dad was just spending a lot of time at work, and there was this sense of like, it's a little bit like drudgery at times. And I think one of the things with Montessori that I particularly love, and I think work is of an essence here, is that it doesn't have to be that way, whether for children or adults, because, although we can look at kids and say that a lot of kids, that actually went through Montessori will come and say, I didn't even know I was working. It felt like play to me, you know?
Right.
But what's crazy is when you look at those kids on some of these activities, like let's say the binomial cube, learning it, or really getting at the pink tower the first time, like it is work. Like they're focused and intense, you know? So there's the challenge of doing something that's just like right within your reach, but it's difficult. It's actually pleasurable for kids. And I just think like how much we can grow as adults by seeing these kids push themselves in the classroom, and they come home and it's like, oh, I did hard work today. And I loved it. It really inspires me to like push myself in the work I do. And I think it's almost like we can reimagine the general perception of what quote work is, even for us adults, that it doesn't have to be drudgery or something I don't want to look forward to. And I'm not saying obviously like there's days when I'm like, man, I don't want to take a break, you know?
Yeah.
So, but the general sense of work can be something really much more meaningful, even spiritually meaningful. Like it's something that I care deeply about, you know?
Right. You know, so my number one goal for my students from the first day they walk into my classroom is that I want them to be happy and excited to come to school.
Yeah.
And I think that the kind of things that they're doing at school and the connections that they're making with their peers and their teachers is really making them feel good. And a lot of it is because they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're feeling challenged.
Yeah.
And that is work. And, you know, if we can promote that feeling that I love to go to school because I'm challenged there, yet that challenge is within my reach. Mm-hmm. We're just going to have children that love to learn. And the longer that you can keep that feeling within a child, I mean, we're raising a generation of children who I would hope could grow into adults that have positive feelings about work.
Yep. I definitely agree. Yeah. And I could see that just becoming like a way of life and a way of looking at adulthood as much more enjoyable, and joyous. Right. And I think I want to raise something a little controversial because I'm curious what you're going to say about it. But one of the things that some parents can look at now, I was in Southern California for a lot of my early development in Montessori, and a lot of parents there were like, you know, you had said their parents want their kids to play more. I was getting the opposite. And it was like, we need to get these kids going in math and reading. And they were very focused on, you know. But one thing that comes up every now and again is that in Montessori, you don't have like like a fake sink in the corner with fake dishes that kids are washing and so forth. And the kind of pretend play. And I wanted to raise it and just put it out there. This pretend play, Montessori, in my view, doesn't have it because why not do as much of the real stuff as you can? Because kids are fully capable. You know, a 3-year-old is capable of washing his own dish.
Right.
So there's no need to add in this pretend work or this pretend play. Give him the steps so that he can do the real work that mommy and daddy are doing, but maybe at a smaller level, you know, with smaller plates, but it's real. Like, I'm curious, what's your take on that? I know it's a little bit sidetrack here, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's really connected to talking about work, though, because I have gotten that question from parents before, like, oh, do you have a pretend kitchen with pretend food? Or do you have a baby doll that has a little crib? And it all circles back to the idea that work in the Montessori classroom they're based in reality and they're purposeful activities, but young children have imaginations that develop on their own. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that I approach pretend play in my classroom, and I was a child who participated in a lot of pretend play, so I love the idea of nurturing that. So, you know, just an example of how I would kind of nurture pretend play is, like you were saying, dishwashing. Now, we have a dishwashing area that has our snack plates, and mm-hmm. children put on the apron and fill up the water, and they're doing this real job that we need them to do because we need our snack plates to be washed. But while they're doing it, they're looking out the window. One might want to pretend to be the mom, or one mm-hmm. might want to pretend to be the dad, and they're pretending that they're playing house and they're at their home and they're washing all their dishes from dinner. And that's an amazing way to have pretend play in your classroom, because they're standing there doing this real job, yet their imaginations and the language that they're using are, it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
So I think that, Montessorians who say that there's not a pretend play area in their classroom, there is. Children will do that in so many ways. Another example is if we're studying an area where baby wearing is part of everyday life, because women need to take their babies to work with them each day, on our geography shelf, we might have a little basket that has a baby sling, and because we can't borrow a real baby to see how that baby sling works, there's a baby doll there as a placeholder. So
it sounds
one
like
child might
for it.
One child might put the baby sling on and see how it works and take it off, and another child might put it on and then carry it to go do another work, and they're pretending that that's their baby. And I think that kind of pretend play can be really useful and really practical in the classroom.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and again, so for people who don't know, Montessori a lot out there, there's a lot of controversy. I would say just like debate about pretend play. So what's kind of cool about this is that one of the reasons I want to get this show out there is because Montessori, she taught certain principles and practices that are clear in her writings. And then it's like, okay, what do we do in practice with these materials? So there's a lot of debate, and I'm happy that this is kind of coming out. With the two things you said, one that's I think is right on, is that kids are going to pretend and they're going to imagine things on their own. And it would be really insane in my view as if a teacher came up with that. There's no pretend in Montessori. Stop that. That would be crazy. I actually can see some, hardcore, what they would call hardcore teachers doing that, which I think would be wrong. But you've set up an area where children are washing dishes. They're doing an activity that they would normally see their parents do. So they're pretending as if I'm a mom and a dad on their own. It's coming from them.
Yeah.
And I think the pretend play where for me it's problematic is when as adults, we're the ones setting the pretend play up. So whether it's like, let's say we had a fake stethoscope or something, we're like, this is the doctor area, and it's a fake stethoscope. Like that, to me, would just be like, we're pushing our own fantasy onto the children. It's not coming from them.
Right.
But
in that instance, why wouldn't you have a doctor come visit and then they could put the real stethoscope on?
Exactly. And that's totally plausible. And I've seen, people, a lot of Montessorians, even at 3 to 6, we invite people to come into the classroom every now and again and share their experiences. And I think like what you were getting at in the geography area, which is really cool, is like, I don't see a lot of parents slinging their babies around at work where I'm at, but it's in the geography area, like you're exposing them to a broader culture where, there's parents that have babies attached to them when they're working, and definitely in some third world countries. And as you said, like, I can't imagine a 4-year-old slinging like a 1-year-old on his shoulders in the classroom. So I don't know exactly how I feel about having the doll in there, but I definitely see where you're coming from to try to like get a real world experience. And it quite possibly might be the only way for that child to kind of feel what's really going on is to kind of imitate it, but with the baby as a fake baby, is because it's impossible to have a real baby, So I think there's a lot of nuance there that goes on, but there's clearly some activities that are just so clear cut. Just do some real work, we just got so sucked into this, like kids need all this plastic pretend stuff and a pretend saw and all this. And it's like, it goes overboard. So but anyways, I'm super happy. I just threw that in there, but I'm happy that we kind of had a little bit of, it's not as clear cut. It's not like you're like, yes, pretend play is awesome, Jesse. I so agree with that, Yeah. So
I think there's a huge range of people that have ideas about pretend play, and honestly, I can see the benefits of either end. And I think just as a teacher with your children in your classroom, you just have to decide which route you kind of want to go down.
Yeah. And I think in the end, I think for me, like I'm pretty tough that I've seen enough of this through my experience to know that the kind of the real pretend stuff is just not helpful. And it's actually, I would say it's harmful from my experience and working with so many kids, but I'm the type that's like, you've got to see it for yourself. Like Montessori is all about being independent. So if somebody's listening, like,
oh, we have to follow this. It's like, no, I'd rather actually a parent do pretend play if that's what her experience is like than to just copy because Montessori said it was so or something like that,
Right, exactly.
Well, cool. I think we covered a bunch of words here. I don't want to overwhelm the parents with like all these different Montessori lingo, like a little bit. It's kind of like the kids, a step at a time.
Yes.
So, well, awesome. Well, I'm happy you came on, Marissa, clarified some of these concepts, and good talking. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Marissa for coming on. If you are curious about her work, she also blogs and shares photos from the classroom with teachers and parents at missymontessori.com. That is MISSY Montessori.com. I hope everyone gained from our discussion. I'm not actually going to add much to it here. I got to get running today. But do note that if there are other Montessori terms or ideas that you particularly would like to know more about, just write me. I try to include some of the requests I get from listeners on these episodes, particularly the Q&As that are coming up. So send them in to Jesse@MontessoriEducation.com, and that's JESSE. Or you can leave a comment, anywhere really out there in internet land where I can get it, of course. So the Montessori Education podcast, so for some of you that don't know, now has 2 episodes a month. So one is an interview like this one here today with Marissa, and the other is a Q&A. The next Q&A should be out March 15th. All right, that is it. Thanks as always for tuning in, and adios until next time.